Having good side escape is so important because if someone can't control you inside, it's very hard to pass your guard. So I'm gonna go through, in my opinion, what are the most common mistakes people make when they're trying to escape side and go through the basics of your first side control escapes.
We're gonna start with the classic side, which is where my opponent has a cross ace on the head and this arm is on the left side of my body, right? There's many different control mechanics and each is gonna kind of require a different escape, but this is like the foundational basic one. So the first big mistake people make is they either they push with their hands too much or they grab even worse. Our job when we're trying to escape side is to create space between me and him. If I'm holding him, I'm just keeping him tight and making it easier for him. So the main mistake people make here is that they try to push with their hands. When he's really close, back up a little bit, when he's really close, it's very hard to push with my hands. I'm very weak in this position. It's like a tricep extension, you're very weak. So when the person is really close, instead of pushing with your hands, you wanna focus on pushing with your forearm instead. So if you could imagine your arm as your elbow to your shoulder and your hand is like this spot like right above your elbow, that's where you wanna push. Because from elbow to shoulder won't bend. From the hand to the shoulder collapses, right? So as he comes down here, I want to keep my forearm at a slightly obtuse angle here because now I have this force and as he drives in, he can't drive in. If my forearm is even perpendicular, his weight can slide up to the wrist and start to collapse me in. So I want to frame here, right? Same thing with the right arm. And this leads to the next detail, which is focusing on blocking the far side hip instead of the near side. His job is to stay inside of my elbow knee space. So go and punch it up real quick. So if my elbow and knee are connected, even if he comes into side control, get tight, it's very hard for him to stay tight. I don't really start getting crushed until he is inside of this space. Now it's very hard to move, right? So what a lot of people do is they're framing on this near side hip, but if you go around that way, they're framing on this near side hip, but as I shrimp or move, he can always follow, right? I want to try to instead get my elbow and knee together, so now as he stays tight and follows, he can't follow because my elbow's blocking. So the way I do that is what I focus on with my right arm is instead of framing on his hip or focusing on where I'm pushing on him, I follow this kind of scooping motion. I turn my thumb backwards and it's like I'm trying to scrape. If you could imagine the person's here he's gonna stay inside. So it's like I'm coming inside and trying to scrape the person outside of that elbow knee space. If you can have a strong frame on their neck with your forearm and a strong framing inside with your elbow here, now you've locked them out of the position and you're able to move on to the next step. So another detail on framing with your arm is often once I get this forearm, I want to kind of go under his chin or his jaw here, and as he stays tight, I can kind of wing my elbow up because that drives his chin up and creates a motion that's easier to get underneath to find the space for my right elbow, and then I can start progressing. So our next main objective, once we have good arm frames, is to get our right knee in between me and him. If I can get my right knee in between me and him, I can now use my knee to create space and it's way more powerful. But there's a lot of mistakes people make when doing this. So probably the biggest mistake is leaving your left foot on the floor. Even if I shrimp out here, which a lot of times I don't shrimp out, if I leave this on the floor, it's hard to bring my knee in. Just back up real quick. Look, if I'm here and I leave my left leg flat and I try to bring my knee up, this is as high as my knee can go here, right? But as soon as I lift my left leg high and close, you see how my knee naturally comes in. So when I'm escaping space inside, I shrimp out or I move my leg, I want to lift this leg up so my knee can come in. So what that looks like is a bad example would be like this. You can't find that. But see, I get the space. Now when I lift this, my knee can find the space to come in and I can start pushing and making space. Another thing that will help with that is every now and then I'll shrimp if I have to, but if I'm kind of close but I can't quite get it in, instead of shrimping, I'll literally just lift my leg in the air and I kick in the air. And see, I do that little hip jump. As long as my elbow is framed, now follow me, it's hard for him to follow me. Try to follow me. See, it's hard for him to follow me and I get that space and now my knee can start coming in and I can start working for the escape. So of course I want to try to use my leg to escape, but in the case that I do need to shrimp, I'm gonna always try to step with my toes and I want to bring my foot as close to my butt as I can so I can get forced to escape. And as soon as I do one shrimp, I'm gonna lift my leg up to start trying to get this in. The problem is if you shrimp and then you try to bring this knee back in with this still on the floor, it's hard to get the knee in. Sometimes also if he's really tight with his elbow on your hip here, I'll even do a forward shrimp. I turn my hips away, I keep my right elbow here blocking the far hip, I put my small toes on the floor and I pull my hip out like this. As soon as I get the space, I lift my leg up and I swing my knee in here. Okay, the next big mistake is once you get your knee in, what a lot of people do is they try to slide all the way through with this knee like they're gonna come back to closed guard. But the reality is if you're fighting someone who's really tough, really strong, they know you want closed guard. They're not gonna let you just come back through. So when you go here, just stay here. When you go through, you end up getting trapped here. And of course you could do what he said, which is push the leg and come back around. But even if he doesn't do that, just right here, my leg is so deleveraged. It's exactly the same as when I explained pushing with your forearm as opposed to your hand. If I'm here, the mechanic I'm using to create space is like kicking with my shin. I don't have any force. I want to push with my knee or like the top of my knee shin here like this because it's strong. If I'm here, this is going to collapse. So you can see when I'm here, I can't create space. So instead, once I get the initial space here, I get my knee in. I want to focus on getting my knee high to his chest here, like this. Once I get the knee in here, from my knee to my hip won't bend, right? So now as he stays heavy, I can use like a leg press. It's really easy to create that space. And once I create that space, now it's gonna be much easier to start escaping, right? So again, come in, right? Even if he's like clasping his hands here a little bit, clasp your hands, right? I get this space, I bring the knee in. Even if I can't get to the chest, then I'll go around down here a little bit. I'll get my knee kind of on his ribs, but I want the top of my knee creating the force for escape, not the shin, because now I get trapped. So here I can start pushing to create space, and now I'm going to progress to the final part of the escape. So the final aspect to finish the escape is using our outside leg to recompose. So all of the elbow framing mechanic is to get my knee in, the knee is coming in to create space, and once I create a little bit of space, I want to make sure I use my outside leg to recompose. So that could come about as a lasso on the shoulder here. I don't need to grab the sleeve. I can push, and see now I create space with this foot as my right leg comes back to me and I center up. Now I have him directly in front of me and I can begin to fight and build from here. That could also come about as like a foot on the hip. I'll go more in detail in a minute, but I could go foot on hip and push, and it allows me to bring this leg out, right? But what you don't want to do is once you go in here, if you start trying to use this leg, you start reaching with it. See, if I try to go on the hip or put with the knee and I start trying to use this to create the motion that way, what I'm doing is reopening that elbow space for him to come back in and finish, right? The whole idea is to try to maintain the protection of the elbow knee. So I create the space, I keep this tight. This leg is what's going to reset me. I'm doing it on the opposite side in that case. But so we're here, right? Again, I get out, I get the space, knee in, start framing, push, throw my foot over. Don't even worry about the sleeve or anything. I throw my foot over my own hand, press, and I'm out. If he keeps his hands clasped around my head really tight, stay really tight here, like this, and get your knees close to me. So he's really tight here. Look, see, I do that hop, I get it, stay tight, yeah. I get my knee in, see, now I can't get rid of this, stay super tight. See, I can't get rid of this, but look, again, I use the top of the knee. Now I have my right hand, you can come around the other side, right? Now, once I have that first knee in, I can actually push on his hip because my knee's blocking the other side. And now this left foot, go back around the other side, is gonna go sideways on his hip. What helps a lot with this is getting really far on my side. Now my left foot comes in with the foot like that on the side of the hip. He's still keeping his hands clasped. This gives me the space, and the final escape portion, my right hand here is going to go under his tricep. I lift my head up and I dip my head under. See, now I can press, frame, start getting my leg out, and now I'm back out into open guard. Once I get back out into open guard, of course he's going to try to repass, but now this becomes more about your ability to tie him up and entangle him with different grips. Once you escape side control, you don't want to freeze. You want to start developing some basic open guard controls that you can kind of control and start building your game from. Of course, guys, there's multiple types of side control, and there's not one technique that's going to get you out of every situation. So you will need different escapes for different types of control, like a head and arm, a reverse head and arm, north-south. I'm going to do future videos on those as well. If you guys like the content, be sure to like and subscribe so you get notified for the next videos.